And those are live pictCS to your viewers coming to you live from Nyeri County, specifically at Gadwariga Primary School. And of course, the CS is with the Water Cabinet Secretary, Water Sanitation Cabinet Secretary Cecily Kariuki, who's also playing a crucial role during this time, because we need water in our schools. We need to ensure that sanitation, clear and good sanitation, has actually been provided in all public and primary schools. So that is why the CS for Water, Sanitation and Irrigation, Cecily Kariuki, is making that tour with Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha. Now, this is the second tour that the CS is making. Yesterday, he was in Nairobi County at Olympic Primary School in Kibra constituency. Today, he's in Nyeri County. He's also expected in Embu County. He's doing these tours just to see the sort of preparedness the schools have put in place as the students reopen schools after 10 months of being at home. So he just needs to ensure that schools are safe for not only learners but also teachers. So let's listen in to what the CS is saying right now.
They accepted about 63 yesterday, and some they are still accepting. Across. That is something that is important. Let me sign the book for that. Doesn't you mean you?
All right, so we'll continue giving you the live pictures, the live coverage of that tour by the CS for Education and also the CS for Water and Sanitation, Cecily Kariuki, and of course Professor Magoha, who is the CS for Education, making that tour in Nyeri County. And so we go back to the interview that I was having with Mr. Kibandi, talking to us about the state of affairs within the interior parts of this country. And Mr. Kibandi, so we are talking about the disadvantages that learners are having within the interior parts of this country, but what steps are being taken to reach out to the most disadvantaged students during this period of COVID-19?
Okay, so in this particular situation, we are trying to get the children to school. And the current steps that are being taken are, one, through the Nyumba Kumi leaders, as an organization and through partnership with the local education office, we are trying to get the Nyumba Kumi leaders to reach out to families, to parents, just to sensitize them and persuade them to allow their children to come back to school. We have a big challenge because the calendar was affected, the cultural calendar, where boys undergo the initiation rites a little earlier in the year. They went later in December, so many of them are still out there. And the process, the whole cycle is not done yet. So there are negotiations now to see how do we fast track that so that these boys especially come back to school. Mm-hmm. We also try to talk to parents, especially because quite a few girls have may fall out maybe because of pregnancy or any other issue. How do we get them back to school? And the bigger issue is a lot of the children in this particular setup became the source of labor in many homes. So that transition has to also be managed. So parents won't just let their cattle be left on their own. So how do we start negotiating that? So a lot of the strategies are through the community leaders at Nyumba Kumi, because they first need to come and identify who's at home and why they're at home, and also work out a strategy of how we get them to school. So the big challenge here is to actually get children to school. Schools are open, teachers are there, but we don't have learners. And that's...
All right, and it's good you've, allow me to cut you short, Mr. Kibandi, it's good you've given us an explanation on what should be done to ensure that, the learners are well taken care of. But let's talk about the exclusion, education exclusion for the marginalized, vulnerable children in the interior parts of the country. We saw this exclusion before even the partial reopening, because the government talked about online learning, and not every student or learner was, or pupil was able to afford this. And now that the situation is even worse, submerged schools, some are not able to report back to school because parents are not financially stable. How worse can this be?
I just had a conversation with someone and they were saying drought, floods have just gotten their competitor and COVID has become an equal. The element of exclusion, what we are implying is that the gap of exclusion has just widened. Because one, these children are already excluded. What we've said now is that even the school that was there or the resources that were there have been washed away or are no longer accessible to them. So during this period, I think it's high time that we came back and seek alternative ways of providing the same education to these children, so that they're not further excluded. This may call for some level of innovation and just trying out different things. We may consider mobile schools in this particular situation, because I would also want to assume with the flooding, there are also families that have been displaced. So we need to act fast as a country and see how these children can be supported in the current situation they're in, as we work towards reconstructing schools and having a more formal setup where they can learn from. So much as
yes,
when it comes to matters, yes, I think when it comes to matters exclusion, if anything, COVID only took us further behind and actually widened the gap for these pastoral children who already were being left behind in all aspects you could think of.
Mr. Kibandi, just hold on. We need to cross over live to Nyeri, where the CS for Education, Professor George Magoha, is currently addressing members of the press. Let's listen in live.
So the narrative that children were not reporting, that the reporting was at 50% is not correct. We are closer to 90% plus. In terms of new admissions at Kiandutu, as at the time I was leaving, they had admitted 63 children, mainly from the slum private schools and other private schools within the Thika Metropole. I'm now here. This is, what is the name? Gidwariga Primary. I am told it is in a slum. And you also have more than 500 students. But first of all, I want to thank the people of Nyeri, because they have done well. The leadership in Nyeri, right from the RC and the Regional Director of Education, and the County Commissioner in Nyeri in particular, and the education person in Nyeri, with regards to the desk delivery program. I have not had any opportunity and reason to come here again after I was here several months ago, because they are among the very top 10 counties that are doing extremely well, move towards 100, and I think that's what we want to do. I chose to come here today because I'm going to visit some schools in slums across the nation. This is actually the third one, and I'm very impressed that the acreage here is good enough. There are enough trees, although I will still tell them to plant a few more trees. When you walk around the school, you find that there are enough empty spaces. Some are, it's like they were preparing for Corona, because the trees are there all the time. So the only thing you have to worry about is rain. Like today's weather is very good. The decision will have to be the head teachers, going to be innovative as to take some classes outside. It will help us to give the children more oxygen and also to deal with social distancing. I think water is not the problem here. So I've washed my hands. I'm also glad to see that we are using bar soap, which is cheaper and more effective. My temperature was taken. I've been to the classrooms. All children are masked. As I had said, as government policy, politics aside, we are going to mask all the children in the slums. And then we shall mask children in very large schools, and there are not very many. There are about 20 of them. And then the rest of the masks we shall keep a spare and provide as and when required. And they will not be kept in one spot, they will be kept across the nation. We are going into the unknown, but I think we are positive. I want to say that even though I had said earlier, it is only the primary school 4 billion that will be released by yesterday. Because of His Excellency the President's intervention, even the secondary schools 14.6 billion were also released yesterday. So the money was released simultaneously, depending on which bank. Don't waste your time on this one. Depending on which bank, perhaps if you bank with KCB, which is the main bank that will reflect today, if you bank with any other bank, give it 1 or 2 days and the money should be available. My only warning is this. Please use this money for what it is meant for. This time, we want to thank God that we are alive. I have no plans to make any extra money this year. Nobody should have plans for doing so. You should just have plans to keep on praying to make sure that you remain alive, and you also help others to be alive. So this money belongs to the children, and God will punish you severely if you even smell the smell of the money. I believe that it's not so much the amount of money that government gives, but more so how we use the money and apply it to where it is required. I've been told that children are being sent away because of development money. Please, if you have any detail of any teacher who is bold enough to return our children home because of development money, give us that information and we shall act very swiftly in the interest of that child. I think I'm happy with the rate of return to school. I'm being told that in Nyeri now, as a county, we have admitted an additional 753 children, both from public schools and private schools. Public schools because the parents may have been affected by the corona pandemic and what have you. So I would want just to tell the nation that we are moving together. We had a little challenges in the coast and in the northeastern region, and we are focusing on them. In Turkana and a few other areas, we know that the school feeding program, which attracts the children to school, has not started yet. The food has been purchased and is in the stores. We are working very closely with the Ministry of Devolution. Within the course of this week, food should hit Turkana schools, which are among the hardest hit, so that children who are attracted to school because of the food also come back to school. I want to thank you very much for your cooperation. I don't know if there's anything that I have not touched, even though I don't. It must be relevant to what we are doing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I won't answer you.
Yeah, there are some parents who are complaining that they aren't getting admissions to the public schools from private schools.
The CS has talked about so many things, but I'll pick on one that I need Mr. Kibandi to respond to because we need to wind up KTN News Center and this conversation. Mr. Kibandi, just respond to what the CS has just said. He's saying that his tours are specifically focusing on schools in the slums. When, or do you think the government is actually neglecting schools in the interior parts of the country? Because I believe they'd also want to see the CS making tours in their schools just to see the state of the sad affairs of what the students and parents and teachers are going through.
I think my comment is we need them to come to the ground. I do understand the slum areas are affected, but the children in the pastoral setting where their presence would make a big difference. I'm made to understand that most of the schools were excluded from the desk program or have not received desks yet or the funding for that. So these are some of the schools we would want them to go to. We would want them to go and listen to the teachers, to listen to the parents, because there are issues there that we need a different response and an immediate one so that we can be able to get these children back and retain them in school. I'm happy to hear that they're considering having the feeding program running, and I'm praying to God that that food does get to schools in time, because that has been a big challenge where food does not get there in time and we lose students probably halfway into the term because many of them they don't get a meal at home and they don't get one at school. The chances that come to school the following day gets more difficult for them and learning becomes difficult. So, I mean, the schools are open. I wish we could also have a team that is monitoring the areas in the pastoral setting as much as possible.
All right.
We have Kajiado, which is not too far from the offices. The setting is pretty much the same. They could also visit and just get a clearer picture of the challenges that are there, because I feel there's still bigger problems there that are not being addressed.
All right. Mr. Nganga Kibandi, Country Manager, Africa Education Trust, I'd like to say asante sana for joining us here on KTN News Center. I was about to say Education News Center because we focus so much on matters education today, but on KTN News Center. My name is Brenda Zedara. Did I pave way for Cecilia Kesho-Madhuva, who's continuing this live coverage of matters, education, and much more, making the headlines in the country. To the men and women behind the scene who make News Center a success, asante sana. God bless you. Tomorrow, God willing, same time, same place.